Thank you so much. So welcome everyone. My name is Priyana Govindaraja, and I'm a member at the MLC and a proud graduate of the Communication and Culture Master's Program. Today, I will be providing technical assistance. I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to this book launch for Creative Resilience and COVID-19, Figuring the Everyday in a Pandemic, edited by Irene Gammel and Jason Wang, and published with Rutledge. So before we begin, I want to remind us that Toronto and our university are located on land which has been the site of human activity for thousands of years. We recognize the nations indigenous to this land, the treaties that govern it, and our shared responsibility to take care of it. In this, we also consider indigenous ways of knowing and learning. And now I turn the microphone to Kelda Yuen, CBC anchor, who joins us today as a moderator for this book launch. Kelda Yuen is known for her brilliant reporting on COVID-19, and we are grateful for her expertise today. Kelda, the microphone is now yours.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Brianne. I really appreciate it. And I'm so thrilled to be here today for this book launch. Welcome, everybody. I want to start by saying a big congratulations to Irene and Jason and all of the incredible contributors on the publication of Creative Resilience and COVID-19, Figuring the Everyday in a Pandemic. So big congratulations to everyone. Now, as Brianne mentioned, my name is Kelda. I am an anchor at CBC in Toronto. But when the pandemic started, I started out, I was a field reporter at that time, back in March 2020. And I remember this particular day very clearly. It was March 14th, 2020. I was working on a Sunday. It was the first day the city of Toronto was essentially shutting down. And I was sent to do a live report outside the CN Tower, which was closed for the very first time. I was standing there and I remember the city just seemed so much quieter. And it was in that moment that it really hit me, I think, that things were really changing. 3 days later, Ontario declared a state of emergency. And I remember in those early days of the pandemic, like many people, I'm sure, I downloaded the House Party app. You remember that? And my friends would get together on it every week to hang out virtually. That was the way things were then. I watched a lot of Netflix, I'm sure many can understand, particularly a lot of horror movies and a lot of crime shows, which I found strangely comforting during this time. I did everything I could to keep myself distracted. Even so, there was no escaping the sense of malaise as the days then turned into months and we were kind of being isolated. Now, as a reporter, one thing that really stood out to me, especially in those early months, is amidst the growing anxiety, our newsroom received so many story ideas from people of camaraderie and of resilience, of the ways that they were trying to cope with all the uncertainty and stay connected to one another. And some of the stories I remember in those early days, a neighborhood shut down their street and organized this huge outdoor scavenger hunt for kids. A university student I remember contacted us. He had started a hotline so that seniors can call in to get help with technology at any time of the day. The city's oldest independent cinema, which I loved, had shifted to hosting virtual tweet-along screenings of classic films, which was very fun, to raise money for themselves. I remember a woman who began about a few months in, starting to assemble a COVID-19 memorial blanket with people across Canada sending her these knitted squares to add to the quilt as a way to honor the dead, but also to memorialize their collective pain. And so we did a lot of those stories, but of course, as the pandemic went on, we also really began to see the social inequalities being unveiled and exacerbated. And my fellow reporters and I, and we still do today, we found ourselves doing more and more stories centered on inequalities related to gender, to race, sexuality, age, you name it, and speaking to people experiencing these inequalities, as well as turning to scholars and experts to better understand all these issues related to COVID. So, creative resilience and COVID-19, very, very timely in that it shines the light on the social and cultural consequences of the pandemic. The book fills a very important scholarly gap by adding to the conversation the non-medical short and long-term effects of COVID-19. And the key part about this book is its focus on hope and resilience, the human capacity to adapt, and the cultural capacity for social support. So I'm very excited to be here today for this book launch. And again, congratulations, Irene and Jason, and to all the contributors. A little bit of logistics at first. We have a special invitee to bring greetings before we move on to words from the book's contributors, and then we'll hear from the editors, Irene and Jason. After that, there will be an opportunity for a Q&A where audience members, anyone out there, can pose questions or give their congratulations. And that is it as for logistics. All right, we are going to go on. All right, it gives me now great pleasure. Dr. Mohamed Lachemi is here, right? I have him in the room. Yay. All right. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our invitee, Dr. Mohamed Lachemi, President and Vice Chancellor of Ryerson University, whose leadership has propelled the internationalization of the university, exploring novel ways of thinking, learning, and creating as a response to the COVID-19 challenge. So President Lachemi, take it away.
Thank you so much, and I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon, and welcome to the launch of Creative Resilience and COVID-19. I am very, very pleased and proud to be part of this event. The Modern Literature and Culture Research Center is making a global impact on pandemic scholarship. The webinar series was a remarkable achievement by Irene and Jason and the team of the MLC. The contributions from international experts and scholars made it truly a worldwide showcase. Now we have this important book and how the arts, humanities, and social sciences helped us navigate COVID-19. My congratulations to and Jason for their work, and my thanks also for positioning our university at the forefront of the conversation about the pandemic and the importance of creative resilience. Thank you, and please enjoy the event.
Thank you so much for that, President Lachemi. Thank you for those inspirational words, for your leadership, and for making the time to be here with us today. We really appreciate it. All right, now it is my pleasure to invite Dr. J. Michael Ryan, the editor of the COVID-19 pandemic book series at Rutledge. Dr. Ryan teaches in the sociology department at Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan and is one of the world's leading researchers of social scientific responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are honored to have him here with us today. Michael, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. And good afternoon and evening, everyone. And for folks who might be in Kazakhstan, early morning. It's about 2 a.m. here, but I'm always happy to stay awake for such a great event. As Kelda mentioned, I am the series editor for Rutledge's COVID-19 pandemic series. So I want to start by sharing just a bit about the series and how it came to be. Back in April of 2020, I put out a call for chapters for a volume specifically on the sociology of COVID-19. I'm a sociologist by training, but I was soon overwhelmed in a good way, which isn't something we could often say over the last couple of years, with a number of proposals that I received not just from sociology, but from a wide range of social sciences, the arts, the humanities, indeed many disciplines. And I quickly realized that a narrow single discipline-based focus was not the right way to approach understanding the pandemic. So I broadened my focus, that single volume morphed into two, and my own perspective of pandemic studies really changed. Realizing that there was a great need, or really what I've come to think of as a mandate for increasing non-medical research perspectives related to the pandemic, I proposed the COVID-19 series to Rutledge. They accepted, and voila. Now, just over a year later, I'm proud to say the series has nearly 20 volumes under contract and several more already out for review. So over the last 2 years, I've given dozens of talks related to the pandemic and all over the world, but I'm truly proud to say that the very first talk I gave was for this very lecture series. That's one of the many reasons I was so thrilled when Irene and Jason approached me with their idea about the volume that we're honoring today. I'm always happy when I receive new proposals for the series, but with Irene and Jason's proposal, I was truly thrilled. Their proposal was an extra special gift at the beginning of the launch of this series, as it promised to be insightful, provocative, informative, and above all, useful in helping us all to understand our ongoing pandemic world. And I'm happy to say that the finished volume more than delivered on the promises of the proposal. So creative resilience in COVID-19, figuring the everyday during a pandemic, reveals how creative and cultural expressions respond to adversity and crisis, both articulating the pandemic, but also offering narratives of coping. That crisis can give voice to creativity is a key concept of many of the essays included in the volume. More importantly than what it helps us understand about theory and policy, this volume helps us understand something perhaps even more important: how individuals and communities have lived, attempted to survive, and sought to make sense of what is perhaps the greatest single disruption to human lives in living memory. So while individual chapters take varying views, methodologies, and outlooks, they all agree on the need to dignify ordinary lives, quotidian experiences, and banal everydayness during and after the pandemic. This volume is one of those rare unicorns in the world of edited volumes, and that each and every chapter is truly outstanding. The volume itself is extremely well organized, and the potential impact it can make is wide-reaching as it is profound. Now, as series editor, I'm not supposed to play favorites, but I'm human. I do indeed have my favorites, and this volume is definitely one of them. So I'm truly honored to have this work as a part of the series. I'm grateful to Irene and Jason, indeed all of the contributors, for your thoughtful contributions, not just to the volume, but to the broader collective goal of making sense of our ongoing COVID-19 world. This is a volume that matters, and in only the most positive of ways. So thank you all for attending today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the contributors.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your remarks and for your ongoing work. Now we will be hearing from some of the international contributors to the book who have joined us from all over. Very exciting. And we will start with Dr. Dominic Pettman at the New School in New York City. Dominic, take it away.
Hi, everyone. What an amazing turnout. I'm flabbergasted. I'm here in Manhattan. And so hopefully you don't hear too many sirens. But so much for COVID fatigue. This is really amazing turnout. So thanks to Irene and Jason for the invitation, and for Michael for the platform. So my contribution, it was immediate and compulsive, since mine is essentially a journal of the initial plague days, from the perspective of someone who found themselves in the middle of the hot zone. This was when New York was really ground zero. And the hot zone itself is a space prefigured and pre-mediated by Hollywood and other such apocalyptic narratives. So as an academic, I was trying to contextualize this eruption of anxiety and unreality within my own frames of understanding. But again, as a human being, I was trying to keep the angel of death at bay through the delusional power of disinterested observation. Nevertheless, my fears at the time, and certainly some lingering, are palpable in every word. So I now see this as a document of those first few weeks of that uncanny combination of horror, boredom, and uncertainty, as well as an attempt to grasp the implications, social, psychological, political, technological, of a moment so often referred to as unprecedented for good reason. So yes, it was mentioned Netflix is, my piece is called Netflix and Chills, about quarantine in the age of the pandemic. And so it was about that queasy temporality of being in lockdown, and sort of time not passing, but also things unfolding. So it's very much about that weird limbo space and the way that the internet prefigured and really crystallized what was happening. So yeah, obviously it's hard to compress it all into 1 minute, but that was my my approach, a kind of diaristic, but also analytical.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for that. And next up, we have Dr. Will Straw. He comes to us from McGill University in Montreal. Will, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. I want to begin by saying that McGill University is built on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous people whose footsteps have marked this territory on which peoples of the world gather. So I bring congratulations to the editors and contributors. I guess maybe I'm the only one from Montreal. Am I the only one? Yeah, okay. My contribution to this volume was an attempt to capture some of the ways in which the nightlife of cities was transformed during the pandemic. Early on, I think sort of the first day it hit in Italy, the president of Italy said, nightlife is finished. And it's now common among those of us who are in this field called night studies to say that the night was the first victim of the pandemic, the first non-human victim. So in what ways I tried to answer, was the culture of the night a victim of the pandemic? How did cities adapt in ways both big and small to the shutdown of nightlife? And my method, to the extent that I had one, was really tracking the smallest of changes in nightlife on the one hand, and the highest level of political debates about the culture of the night. And I'm very excited to be in a book that came deep enough into the pandemic that I think we could already reflect upon what was happening, but close enough to the events described that we could capture and convey a sense of what pandemic life was like. So I congratulate the editors, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this.
Thank you very much, Will, for your remarks. And now I would like to call on our next speaker, and that is Dr. Brianne Faz, who is joining us from Arizona State University. Brianne.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice this is such a nice, large event. It's such a treat. So I wrote a chapter called He's Thinking About Sex, I'm Thinking About Survival, Women's Sexual, Domestic, and Emotional Labor during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in this chapter, I explore the ways that the pandemic lockdowns and quarantines expose the fault lines of gendered labor and foregrounded women's role in engaging in multiple forms of unpaid, often unseen labor. Specifically drawing from my experiences as a psychotherapist during the period of March to December of 2020, I recount brief descriptions of psychotherapy cases to discuss women's sexual, domestic, and emotional labor during the pandemic, and how women negotiated not only their own existential crises and workforce pressures, but also the highly gendered forms of labor within domestic spaces. So I highlight examples illustrating the sexual, domestic, and emotional to show how women experience these heightened burdens of needing to provide labor. And notably, this gendered labor included not only women in opposite sex marriages, but also a variety of other kinds of arrangements, things like young women caring for a sibling, or single mothers with new babies, middle-aged women coping with the death of a parent, college students stuck at home with anxious parents. I mean, I think a lot of us can relate to a lot of those scenarios. So gendered labor sort of permeated women's pandemic experiences, saddling them with undue burdens and at times hobbling their aspirations for self-care, career advancement, rest. I mean, women are just exhausted. I think we just have to sort of keep remembering and thinking about that all the time, because the toll has been really huge. And for me, I was just so thrilled to be part of a book, really the first on COVID-19 and resilience. But I also just really enjoyed thinking a lot about vulnerability, as this topic is really in ascendancy right now. And I just think that because so much of the pandemic has been spent dealing with institutions that gaslight and ignore COVID-19, that my university never really mentions it at all. We just sort of pretend that it doesn't exist. And of course, as a therapist, you hear endless stories about the toll, the suffering, the grieving. So it just felt really important to, and it feels important even now, to take space to reflect and take seriously all the traumas that we've all just lived through, but also map a future that is more hopeful and resilient, which I think is the next step in all of this, collectively, especially. So thank you for the wonderful collective energy around this volume, and I'm so proud to be part of it. And Irene is just a force of nature, so we all just have so much appreciation for her. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Brianne. Now we would like to call upon Dr. Mitchell Hammond. He is coming to us from the University of Victoria in British Columbia. Mitch, take it away.
Hello, yes, and greetings and congratulations from Vancouver Island in Victoria, which is also the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, where relationships with the Sanghees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples continue to this day. I'm a historian of medicine who focuses on Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, and I was pleased to contribute reflections on past pandemics in relation to COVID-19. Historians are acutely aware that the COVID pandemic is still unfolding, and for us, it's not our normal terrain to reflect on events that are still in motion, but in such situations, history becomes a partner to think with, and it finds relevance in relation to other forms of social, artistic, and cultural discourse, which is why I was so pleased to join this project. Lots of aspects of the crisis are unprecedented, but COVID-19 also poses enduring questions about our experience of a modern world. How do we maintain sociability in urban spaces during crises? How should governments influence everyday life? How do medical interventions figure into our lives and our communal obligations? And so my chapter uses the early modern German city of Augsburg in the 16th and 17th centuries as a case study. And I discuss how cities have long been a focal point for such questions. City experiences created a kind of template for contagion crises that follows a plot of crisis and response and resolution. And our experience of COVID, I would say, both reflects and challenges this dramatic arc. Cities and their responses to crises are changing as relationships between global and local forces are redrawn in our highly mobile and interconnected world. So I was delighted to be a part of this work, and Irene, Jason, and all the other contributors have my sincere thanks.
Thank you very, very much for that, Mitchell. And next, we are moving to Manchester, England, and Natalie Ilsley at Manchester University. Natalie, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Yes, hello everybody. And I bring a huge congratulations from the north of England in Manchester. So my chapter with Irene Gammel offers a visual analysis of two photographers, Bill Hayes and Ruth Corney, who took to the streets of New York and London respectively to document the first wave of the lockdown. And what we do is we illuminate the role of photography as a mode for exploring disaster and resilience through storytelling and effect. And I have to say that the most exciting part for me as a PhD student was participating in the co-writing process with Dr. Gammel herself. I hadn't done it before, and she was very, very kind and nurturing. So thank you for that. And I also found it really enriching, kind of speaking and getting to know the photographers. And in a weird Freaky Friday moment, if you can call it that, it turns out that after speaking with Ruth Corney, I was actually living in the same flat in Manchester she lived in 20 years earlier. So that was quite spooky, and I had no idea until we spoke. So yeah, that's my story. But thank you again, to the editors, and congratulations to all the contributors.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And that is a pretty cool, pretty incredible coincidence. Next, I would like to welcome contributors, Dr. David Chicado and Cameron McDonald, represented here by Cameron from the University of Toronto. Cameron, the mic is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kelda, for that introduction. Bringing my congratulations from University of Toronto, where I'm currently pursuing my PhD. For this collection, I had the pleasure of working alongside David Chicado at York University to think through the ways sonic phenomena offer modes of resistance as well as resilience during the pandemic, bridging theories on sound and posthumanism with the emerging field of COVID-19 studies. Our chapter tunes into the pandemic silences, the noise making, and the music that arrived through COVID-19 to consider how sound and orality shape our understanding of ourselves, of our bodies, personal, social, and otherwise, as sites of flow, flux, and change. What I found most impactful during this whole process and as a contributor was just witnessing Irene's and Jason's care, attention, and generosity throughout the whole editing process, which has been so invaluable to me and such a learning curve as an early scholar. The collection's wide array of fields, geographies, and approaches to COVID-19 is just a further testament to their ability to generate spaces of growth, creativity, and connection. And I'm thrilled to count myself as a member of this community that they've made possible through this publication. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Cameron. All right, next up, we are going back to the West Coast to welcome Doctors Karin and Stan Beeler from the University of Northern British Columbia, represented here by Karin. Karin, take it away.
Hello, everybody. We bring congratulations from Prince George, Canada. We are in Northern British Columbia. And I'd like to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the unceded traditional territory of the Lachemi. Our essay is called Going Digital in a Small City Hub, Community Theater and Dog Performance Events During Lockdown. And it addresses the role of screen arts during the COVID-19 pandemic in the context of community life in a Northern Canadian town. We discuss the value of screen culture in two key areas: the production and performance of community theater via Zoom, and the use of video technology and platforms for the recording and viewing of online canine sports. Really, the most exciting part of being included in Creative Resilience and COVID-19 has been our ability to share our experiences of creativity, collaboration, and connection with a wider scholarly community, including the area of health research. And I have to say, or we have to say, that our dog Jackson, there's a painting I did of him in the back. He actually earned a quarantine title during the pandemic and even won the photo contest sponsored by our university's Health Research Institute. I don't know if you can see it very well here, but the lighting equipment is actually foregrounded, which is appropriate for an article on screen arts. Thanks.
I think I speak for everyone when I say, aw, and congratulations to Jackson. All right, we have just a couple more contributors to get to before we move on to the editor's remarks. So next, I would like to welcome Dr. Emmy Waldman at Bournemouth University in England. Emmy, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I bring greetings from Bournemouth. I just moved actually from Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm adjusting to the new time zone. It's 9 p.m. here. My chapter explores the hugely rich and diverse body of comics work that emerged during and about the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm asking questions in my chapter like, what can comics reveal about everyday life during a pandemic? What makes the comics medium especially well suited for figuring new shapes of the everyday during our pandemic times? And more basically, who are the pandemic comics authors and audiences? So my chapter explores the central contexts, forms, themes, creators, and audiences of this still evolving body of work with a focus on one particularly salient subgenre, which is the pandemic diary comic. So these comics diaries participate in a contemporary aesthetics of everyday life, but they are distinct both in the altered pandemic temporalities that they capture and in the modalities of critique, resistance, and resilience that they enact. So made to be read and shared, comics not only offer creators a means of coping with the pandemic trauma, they also connect isolated individuals in an age of social distancing. And ultimately, I argue that COVID-19 comics are uniquely poised to write history from below, representing and documenting frequently overlooked ordinary lives in an extraordinary time. And then finally, a hugely exciting part of this project for me has been the ability to meet and collaborate with such a wonderful collection of scholars and editors, all coming together to refract this really compelling topic through their several lenses. So thank you so much and congratulations to all.
Thank you so much for that, Emmy. And now we're moving on to our final contributor who has a few remarks, and that is Raymie Moore from the University of Arkansas. Raymie, take it away.
All right, well, thank you all, and greetings from the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences here in Northwest Arkansas. I'll be extremely brief. I wanted to just chat about my chapter co-written with a couple of authors from UAMS Northwest, Pearl McElfish, and Dr. Sheldon Ricklin, who is a Marshallese physician. My chapter covers Marshallese Islander cultural resilience during COVID-19. And one of the things that we discuss in this chapter is the way that Marshallese Islanders in diaspora here in Arkansas, right, maybe not a place you expect to find the largest population of Marshallese Islanders in the continental United States. But we do find a huge number of Marshallese Islanders here, and unfortunately they face pretty extreme health disparities stemming from histories of nuclear testing in the Marshallese Islands, along with decades of economic inequality. So one of the things that we found while we were engaging in conversations with Marshallese folks about their experiences in the pandemic was the way that for a community that values talk story, a cultural practice of spending time together face-to-face discussing, the pandemic seems like it would have been incredibly divisive for this community. And in fact, we found the opposite, that for Marshallese Islanders, they felt more connected to both their cultural identity and their community, even as they had to engage in using technology in new ways that were maybe not as comfortable for older members of the population who did not grow up using Facebook Live or Messenger or getting on FaceTime on their phones. So, one of the things that I would like to say for my co-authors and the Marshallese folks that we worked with is just how important it is to emphasize the ways that communities with strong cultural traditions can leverage those traditions to respond to new and very difficult circumstances, to support one another and react in a way that ends up with some kind of positive in the face of so much death and suffering. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, very well said. Thank you so much, Raymie, for your remarks and for being with us today. And I want to thank all of the contributors for your remarks, for your work, and for being here today for this exciting book launch. All right, now it is time to turn the floor to our editors, Irene Gammel and Jason Wang, who are both at the Modern Literature and Culture Research Center in Toronto, where this book originated. Now, the MLC Research Center has a long history of responding to historical and cultural social change, and their research focuses on processes of upheaval and reconstruction as represented in literature, in media, and in culture. The center also brings scholarship into the public domain and public discourse, as seen through their pandemic webinar series. So it is now my great pleasure to turn the microphone over to Irene and Jason. Take it away.
Thank you so much. First of all, Kelda, for being such a wonderful, generous, and eloquent host. It's absolutely wonderful to have you involved here. And also to the contributors. I mean, it's just been such a pleasure to work at short notice with so many contributors and have the dedication, the energy, the rigor, and the scholarship, and this sheer desire to do something during an enormous crisis. So I think that in itself, just congratulations to everybody. It's been absolutely amazing working with you and having you on board this collection. I also want to say special thank you to Rutledge book series editor, Michael Ryan. Michael, you're a real sweetheart. The way in which you go about things, the way in which you support your editors, also in relation to the press itself, is just absolutely outstanding. I hope there is a medal that we can give to somebody like yourself, because you've been incredibly supportive of all of us. And this collection would not be as strong without your rigor and without your integrity in helping us with it. Thank you so much for that. And I also want to say thank you to President Lachemi for supporting our center, to Dean Pamela Sugiman for supporting us along the way. All of this means so much. And certainly thank you to the MLC Research Center for all of the help also in organizing this launch. So thank you so much for that. Now, just a few words. Our research program at the MLC is dedicated to the traumas of the past, the literature and arts of the First World War, with its mass death and industrial graveyards that would preoccupy the literature of the first decades of the 20th century. Consequently, when COVID-19 struck more than 2 years ago now, we already had a lot of experience in theorizing narratives of trauma. But living through trauma, the fear, the uncertainty, the isolation was something very different from looking at historical and cultural documents from the past. Being immersed in the trauma of lockdown and witnessing the surreal reality of daily death statistics was a new phenomenon that instilled in us a totally new awareness of our own vulnerability, but also people of our own deep connectedness as humans and our responsibility toward each other. In these moments, especially the early moments of the crisis, we all grappled with making sense with this extraordinary situation that propelled the entire world to a reset and to rethinking. We turned to writers, to thinkers, and to artists to help us in this crisis. When COVID-19 struck, Indian American writer Amitava Kumar, who was also a distinguished speaker at our pandemic webinar series, lived with his family in a small town in upstate New York. With shock and dismay, Kumar consumed the daily news of death tolls from around the world and felt propelled to respond to a world of bad news. By creating artistic postcard collages and incorporating newspaper snippets into them, Kumar created his coronavirus diary as an ongoing serial, as seen here in the slide. And we use this as our frontispiece. On day 29, April 10th, 2020, he painted a single flower culled from a bunch of tulips his wife had brought home to pay tribute to the nameless dead through painting. Newspaper snippets float around the flower, words rising like bubbles in water. COVID-19, pandemic, coronavirus, funny home videos, a big broth, a song. As Kumar explains, it is my belief that literature will always save our life. This might just be my professional bias, but in this new world where we are told not to touch for fear of contagion, I find a greater purpose in using words. Yeah, the importance of using words. At the same time, while news may be bad here, Kumar opts for warm and positive color palettes, reminding viewers of the tenderness, hope, and resilience in the dark and uncertain situation. But there is also a great deal of white space in this painting, white space that speaks of absence, recalling the tremendous loss of so many dead whose presence is obscured often by abstract statistics. At the very same time that Kumar responded to COVID-19 with his postcards, Chinese artist Wang Jueping had escaped from the city to the countryside in Zhejiang province in East China. With COVID-19 gaining momentum during the Spring Festival holidays, she turned to the online medium to receive her daily news. And like Kumar, she was touched by those on the front line. Isolated at home, she felt compelled to record her feelings through art making. Having only her iPad She tried her hand at digital painting for the first time, and here are the results. Like Kumar's, there is a DIY dimension to this artistic construction, which is nonetheless profoundly moving and complex as a work of art, depicting infected lungs and DNA strands. In the bottom foreground is a group of 6 professionals, medical professionals, swathed in protective personal equipment, moving as a team from right to left, as if moving against time. This temporal motif is also highlighted in her April 2020 ink wash on paper entitled Race Against Time to Fight the Epidemic. She consistently emphasizes the idea of the united effort that penetrates the very ethos of collective culture and resilience in confronting the crisis. However, these works don't glorify a certain group of heroes. Rather, the painting semiotic communicates an ethics of appreciation. A key element in quickly containing the pandemic lies in ordinary people, including medical professionals, doing their part, whether it's on the front line or staying at home. These works exemplify what is at the heart of this volume of essays: the cultural, social, and political concerns that have been brought to the forefront in our daily pandemic lives are deeply entangled in the ways that COVID-19 is discussed, represented, and visualized in media and culture. The 17 essays collected in the book are presented in 4 clusters, signaling focal points from navigating the crisis to looking toward the future. The book begins with what we call crisis, space, and time. From there, we move to vulnerability and resilience. From there to memory, visuality, and creativity, and then to adaptation, hope, and social change. By taking a communication and culture focus, our volume explores arts, culture, and everyday life as a way of navigating through and past the pandemic. During the pandemic, the most ordinary decisions and routines had become infused with ethical and existential questions. In other words, the crisis of the pandemic is often also a crisis of the personal, as each and every person is hit with particular losses, as well as the collective, because we need to work together in order to get through it. The malaise of everyday life isn't necessarily the result of the pandemic either. Rather, it is often an exacerbation of the precarities that have already been part of our built environments. What was most exciting to me was to work with all of these dedicated people, scholars, artists, writers, and also to experience their sense of loss and empathy throughout their commitment and dedication to responsible action. And above all, I also want to thank my co-editor, Dr. Jason Wang, a formidable co-editor, people, if I may say so. Not only did Jason complete his doctoral dissertation during the pandemic, but he at the same time embarked on this second book project with me, always with passion and dedication. So congratulations, Jason. Congratulations to all of the contributors. And now over to you, Jason.
Oh, thank you so much, Irene, for the kind words. And also thank you, Kelza, Michael, and President Lachemi, as well as our brilliant contributors for all your remarks. I just wanted to extend what Irene just shared and to add that the essays collected in this volume are based on our co-hosted pandemic webinar series, which we launched at the Modern Literature and Culture Research Center in March 2020 as a way of creating a platform for public discussion on the evolving crisis, and which also became a community building framework of support. Not only has this pandemic webinar community worked towards the original answers to the key research questions, it has also provided a dynamic network of international insight and support, with each webinar crossing national borders and disciplinary boundaries. While communication software such as Zoom and Google Meet is not something new, it has been used with a renewed interest during the mass lockdowns and the quarantines, rendering a digitally mediated community across generations, professions, countries of residence, and other physical barriers. This technology was essential in the research and the writing of this book. As we prepared for this book, we lived through the deadly part of the pandemic, witnessing the individual and the social struggles across borders. In the process, these essays are inevitably concerned with themes of cultural authority, such as gender, sexuality, age, race, ethnicity, and class, as well as with trauma and social justice. They explore how artists, writers, scholars, and advocates uncover the hope, plasticity, and empowerment evident in the periods of worldwide loss and struggle, factors which are critical to both overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic and shaping the post-pandemic era. Together, the essays provide a fundamental knowledge on pandemic from the front lines of COVID-19 through our considerations of the arts, humanities, and the social sciences with a focus on media and communication. We have edited this book as a resource for scholars and students, but also for general readers. And we hope you find the book useful as a tool, and we look forward to hearing from you. We also want to thank our 23 outstanding contributors who have embarked on this journey with us, respecting our often very tight timelines without compromising scholarly rigor and accuracy. You simply are the best. And we also want to thank Dr. J. Michael Ryan for being such an awesome supportive book series editor and a champion of ideas. We thank Rutledge for doing such a great job with the book, editorially and visually. We thank Shirk for student support for this project. We also thank the support from our university, especially the Office of the President, the Office of the Vice President of Research and Innovation, and the Dean's Office in the Faculty of Arts for support of the MLC Research Center where the research took place. And finally, I also want to thank Irene for her leadership and mentorship throughout this process, and for instantly shifting the operations at the MLC Research Center when COVID-19 struck. This book is a labor of love and a collaboration at its best at both the local and the global levels. Ultimately, the book is a tribute and a testimony to a most difficult time of stress and uncertainty, but also a tribute to collective hope and creative resilience. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Irene. Thank you to Jason for that presentation. Yeah, it really is an incredible book. I managed to get an early copy. I was reading through it. So many important facets of the pandemic seen through the lens of the arts and humanities, which is really important. Okay, so now without further ado, we are moving to the Q&A portion of the hour. I would now like to invite anyone in our audience who may have questions to pose those questions by either raising your hand, or if you'd like to do it anonymously, you can just type your question into the chat box. Our lovely Brianne will be able to get those, and she will read those questions out anonymously. So I see several people have their hands raised, so let's get right to it. So first question, let's go to Warson Hausman. If you'd like to pose your question, go ahead, floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you so much, Kelda, and thank you, Irene, thank you, Jason, and thank you to all the contributors for just an incredible work. I really cannot thank you guys enough. There's so many themes that were covered that I really do feel are important and just undershared. I feel like there's the medical era and the medical field definitely took most of the narrative. So I feel like this is kind of reclaiming that voice quite a bit. So I wanted to say thank you. I 2 questions, but I'm going to ask one, and if there's time left at the end, I will ask another. And this is to all the contributors. Let's see. What advice should creatives give to institutions that, in my opinion, really dropped the ball in terms of communicating about and during the pandemic? I find that creatives were very effective in getting their messages across, and institutions did many institutions, including health institutions, education institutions across the board, really did the opposite. So I'd love to get your thoughts.
Thank you so much for that question, Warson. It's a wonderful, wonderful question, because of course, when something like a crisis happens, communication leadership are so important in order to galvanize the community, in order to work together, in order to mitigate some of the other awful things that can happen as the pandemic lengthened. Of course, nobody knew right from the start how long this would take. I think many people would have assumed it will just take a month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3, and then we'll be back to normal. By fall, we'll be in a regular program at the university again. That did not happen. I think that's why we hear the word unprecedented so often. And what is important, I totally agree with you, is the focus on communication. That's what we tried to do with the pandemic webinar series, in coming out right away, not saying we have the answers, because nobody had the answers. Not even the experts had the answers. All we could do was talk about it and work toward answers together, but also share the information that we had available. And I think that's why the pandemic webinar series was such an effective sort of tool in order to discuss this. And I'm sure that Jason might have a couple of words to add to that one as well.
Oh, I would actually pass my phone to our editor, Michael Ryan, because he's a true expert of the creative and institutional response to it. Michael, why don't you chip in?
Well, it's a tough question. I think Irene really nailed it. In the early days, it was really about having a conversation. And I think probably one of the early crises was everyone trying to be an expert and trying to sort of have a monologue rather than a dialogue. And that ended up being very problematic because we weren't sure quite who to turn to. I think we found people maybe overstepping their bounds. We found politicians trying to be medical experts and medical experts suddenly becoming politicians. And it became, I think, quite confusing. I think also, and this was an imperative for the series, was we were sort of being dominated by medical voices, which makes a lot of sense, right? It's a virus, it infects our bodies, but there were these other social aspects that were going on as well. Right? So it was more of a sendemic, is how I like to think of it. So we had the virus to worry about. We also had the pandemic to worry about, right? Which was all these social and other aspects. So I'm not sure if that quite answered your question, but I think communication, needed to be more of a dialogue than a monologue. And we needed to hear from more voices, right? We needed to get more people speaking.
Good point.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let's get to, we have a couple of questions. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Next up, we have, let's go to Rebecca. Rebecca, if you'd like to pose your question.
Thank you so much. I just want to offer first, of course, a huge congratulations to Dr. Gammel, Dr. Wang, and everyone involved in the publication. It's just so inspiring to hear about how you all came together to do this important work during such a challenging time. I also want to sincerely thank Dr. Gammel and everyone in the lovely MLC team for providing such a tireless and compassionate example of what it means to stay hopeful over the past few years. I do know that like anything, the going can't have been easy, especially under the conditions of the pandemic when we all experience these new forms of trauma and fatigue and burnout. So my question is, as the editors and as creatives, how did you cope and power through those days of exhaustion in the process of putting together a book on the pandemic? And what would be your advice to other scholars and other creatives still going through this right now?
What a fantastic question. This is so lovely, Rebecca, to hear you talk about this with so much wisdom, actually. And what I would say is, because I think many of us have encountered not just losses, but pains, and certainly the certainly fatigue that you're talking about, this being exposed to this for such a length of time, the up and down, the opening up, the closing down again, all of this takes an enormous strain. And I think it's so important not just to do what we often do really well, and that is compartmentalize in our lives. Yeah, we are functioning always on a daily basis, but we also need to pay attention that we don't burn out in the process. And I think what has been enormously important is actually a project such as this one, because that got us into touch with people talking about certain things. And then at that point, also recognizing the limits. I felt that there were new sort of recognitions of limits, and also a new tolerance of some of the limits, and a listening to the limits, what is doable, what is not doable, etc. I think those things are very important.
Yeah, maybe I'll add one small thing. I'll keep it short as well. Is that, by working with our network of international scholars on this book, we also realize like many of our contributors also often make a sacrifice in their regular research agenda. And, as a scholars, they all feel very intellectually responsible for what the societal change and what they have witnessed and experienced. And this is a very, very much a big kudos to them, because all of our contributors have their own, regular research agenda and the research projects, and often they have to sideline on those major projects in order to prioritize in these COVID-19 studies, and often opinions with their own professional background.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let's go now to Gail, who has her hand raised. Gail, go ahead.
Okay, so Rebecca, you covered a lot of the same ground that I was going to cover, but I want to remember back to the beginning of the series. And I want to say thank you so much to Irene and Jason for coming up with the brilliant idea of having a series that would probe, and to sort of taking the ball 2 weeks by 2 weeks by 2 weeks to try and flesh things out. But what I'm remembering is one of the very first sessions, there was a reference to Jonathan Lear's book of Radical Hope. And listening to the comments today makes me think that your project, as Jason said, of collecting and sharing fundamental knowledge, exploring the social, the cultural, the medical, across borders in a pandemic time that was horrific, unknown, unpredictable, and, just frightening for many people. And so I am wondering if you were aware that what you were doing was probing and collecting so you could spread out this piece of radical hope that I think your book represents.
Thank you so much for that question. Wonderful, wonderful question. And may I also just say, Gail, you have been part of this, what we've done, because you were there from the beginning, you were supporting, and you came in with questions, with some tentative answers, with discussion points, and so on. So that's the important part. And for us, we did not wake up at the beginning of COVID and say, let's start a new series. We just said, we need to find a form. We are all isolated. Nobody's talking. What are we going to do? It's just silence everywhere. And we just said, we need to find that platform and talk, have a single conversation. And then it was also the positive feedback to that kept us going from week to week. Often contributors would write in and say, why don't you do a session on such and such? And we would take that idea then as the next impetus. So that's how it evolved. In other words, there was also a kind of participatory component in how the series evolved. And I found that fascinating. Yeah, Jason, anything from your corner to add?
Yeah, maybe I also add that, the whole webinar series was what I always call the making process. We don't have answers for every question, and those questions often $1 million question are really difficult. But what is the key component for it is we are able to digitally huddle together and navigate the situation as a collective being. And I think this goes back to what Gail just mentioned. What is a radical hope is the hope beyond the imagination. And that imagination requires a collective ambition and collective actions. Thank you.
Well put. Well put.
Thank you.
Very well put. Thank you so much, Irene and Jason, for the remarks. And we do have one more question, and we're going to go to that right now. And it is from John Shields. John, take it away. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Irene and Jason and Michael and all of the authors of the chapters for this amazing volume. I should say that I have ordered my copy, but I haven't received it yet. So I'm very much looking forward to receiving that in the mail.
Maybe
and I also
win it in a moment. There will
Yes.
be some copies that can be won.
I didn't order the online version. I like my books as books. And also, I did want to thank you for putting on that seminar series that has been talked about in the past. It was certainly something, I attended quite a few of them, and I really did anticipate them coming up, and they really were, I think, something that helped think through parts of the crisis and so forth. I think now we're all a little bit zoomed out in terms of these things, and so we're now looking for more personal contacts, but I think they were really, really valuable, especially during that period of time. And my question really touches upon what Rebecca had mentioned before, and that is how did working on this volume and working on the chapters impact your own personal, I guess, perspectives and management of the pandemic itself? I know when in my own case, the pandemic happened during the beginning of my sabbatical. And one of the things I landed off doing, because I research immigration, is look at that social resilience in immigration, and really kind of put all my focus into that. And I guess it was one way of kind of managing through this. I think it was also a little bit obsessive. So I'm not sure all of the features were good. So part of that is probably reflected in the volume itself, in terms of at least with some of the contributions. But I'm just kind of curious as to how that process affected that dimension.
Thank you so much for that. I have to say, just from a personal point of view, it helped me a great deal to work through something that was enormously scary. And it just gave me a sense I could dive into some of the literatures of previous centuries dealing with pandemics and so on. That provided a very fascinating pattern, actually, in looking at that, looking at other people's feelings and so on. So that was a very interesting insight. And then co-learning with the contributors, coming at this from a variety of angles, whether it's the psychological perspective, and here the sort of pressures for more sex in the household that Brianne Faz was, for example, talking about, and some of the very, very deeply personal issues that might come up in a particular household when people are suddenly locked up. So all of that was just enormously helpful in, I think, also creating empathy and making me understand the students in the classroom, some of the struggles that they might have been undergoing. It's one thing hearing about it in the abstract, but it's another thing being closer to it and having learned about it in a variety of contexts. So to me, it was just enormously beneficial to learn about this.
Yeah, thanks, John, for the question. Maybe I'll just expand what Irene's first point as well is I think the pandemic really make us, as a literary scholar, to look deeper into our own roots and to see how our own previous research, which we never had any connection regarding the pandemic before, and actually creates the new kind of creative connections or resonance in this sense. And maybe, I would like to pass the mic on to Mitchell. He's a historian. Like when Irene shared this point of going back to our own academic discipline, looking for answer or looking for a way to navigate the pandemic, I often think of my historian colleagues. Mitchell?
Oh, thank you, Jason. Just very briefly, what I see with pandemics from the past is that a certain story emerged, a certain narrative of crisis and response, and then a receding crisis that is oriented towards a city's experience. And to some extent, we have that experience today with COVID, but to some extent also that narrative has been challenged and overturned because, of course, it's a global event in a very interconnected world. And so it's been fruitful for me as a historian, thinking about this very much alongside everyone else and not having answers or precedents to understand that we have a narrative baked in that we are in part drawing upon, but also responding to and moving beyond.
Well, thank you very much, Mitchell, for that. And thank you to Jason and Irene for all your insights. We are now getting a little bit past 5 and we have some exciting stuff coming up. So we're gonna get to that right now. But again, thank you so much for everyone who posed those great questions and everyone for their insights. Okay, now is the time for the raffle. Very exciting. So at this time, I would like to invite MLC coordinator Renee LeBlanc, who will spin the wheel for the raffle for the book giveaway. Renee, take it away.
Thanks so much, Kelda. I very much appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I have the great privilege today of doing the book giveaway, spinning the wheel. But before then, I just want to mention a couple of details about how you can order your copy of Creative Resilience. So you can order your copy of Creative Resilience in COVID-19 from Rutledge's site, both inside and outside of Canada. To receive a 20% discount, use the promo code ESA22. Brianne will be posting the promo code in the chat box. But if you miss it, please don't hesitate to email us at mlcadmin@ryerson.ca. Brianne, if you could also post that in the chat as well, and I will send you the code directly. So the promo code is valid until June 30th. But yes, now to the raffle for our 2 copies of Creative Resilience since COVID-19, which a big thank you to Rutledge for generously providing 2 complimentary copies. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here so you guys can see our beautiful book giveaway wheel, and we can get on to the excitement. Okay, everybody. So for our first winner of the Creative Resilience in COVID-19 book giveaway, here we go. All right. So Emmanuel Musuni, if you are still here, please know that I'm going to reach out to you after for information as to how we can deliver you your wonderful free copy. All right. Now we have a second book to give away here. Ready? Here we go. It's going very fast. Not sure where it's going to go this time. All right. Congratulations, May Wang. We have our second winner of the complimentary copy of Creative Resilience in COVID-19. So Emmanuel and May, I will be in touch with you directly after the event to get some more information from you for the book giveaway. Okay. So congratulations to both winners, but we'd once again like to thank Rutledge for making available these 2 copies of the book. Please don't hesitate to go and pick up your copy. It is truly a fantastic, fantastic accomplishment. But thank yous, I want to say on behalf of the MLC Research Center, a big thank you to our host, Kelda Yuen, for her awesome moderation, and also to CBC for its support of this event. Kelda, your expertise, your engagement, and your intellectual curiosity throughout the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us a lot over the past couple of years, and we're very grateful for the generosity of your time today. So can we all please give Kelda a big round of virtual applause? All right. And now on to a champagne toast to the editors and contributors. So can I please ask Jason and Irene to join me on our MLC stage?
All right, thank you very much for that, Renee. That was very nice. I have my glass. If anybody, if you have your glass, it doesn't have to be champagne. Mine's lemonade. I wish it was champagne, but as they're getting ready, oh, this is exciting. The wheel was pretty cool too. I've never seen a wheel like that. Yeah, that was my first time.
It was quite,
it was
quite the pop.
Yes. We don't do any things halfway here.
All right. We got the glasses. Ooh, wow.
Hey, let's raise the glass. Congratulations to everyone. Please all raise your glass. And thank you so much. Congratulations.
Yay, cheers. Take a sip.
Wonderful. Okay.
And I hope as you're enjoying your beverage, we just want to say again, thank you so much for your participation, for your engagement, for your questions today. All the contributors, I hope you will continue to celebrate a little bit this evening and just have fun with the book. And again, Kelda, thank you so much for being there. Thank you so much to Renee for helping out. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Irene, Jason, Renee, Brianne, everyone. Just a big thank you for inviting me here today. And also huge congratulations, Jason, Irene, and to all the contributors of this book. I have my copy here. It is an incredible collection. And I hope for anyone out there who hasn't got your hands on one yet, definitely get your hands on one. And I want to, again, give a big congratulations and thank you for everyone who was able to join us here today. And this does bring us to the end of the book launch. A recording of this event, though, will be available online by the weekend. And everyone, thank you so much again. Have a great evening. Stay well, stay safe, keep reading, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye.